Roundup, a recap of what's happening at City Hall with John Ongaro. The views expressed in this program are solely of those of the host and not necessarily those of the radio station or its partners.
And away we go. A late start last night to the meeting. Must have been a dandy and closed session because the meeting didn't start for at least about 20 minutes just before 7 o'clock. First up, removed from the consent agenda. That's the agenda that just gets rubber stamped. One of the topics removed from that, council was asked to approve an update to the city's municipal alcohol policy, which governs where alcohol can be served at events on city property. The policy itself has been around for a long time, originally approved back in 2000 and updated most recently in 2021. It's basically the rule book the city uses to manage alcohol service at public events in parks and municipal facilities. Now, the proposed change last night was pretty straightforward. Administration recommended adding 2 locations to the list of city facilities where alcohol could be permitted during approved events. The first one, Waverly Park, and the second one, the new T-Baytel Multiplex. Now, Waverly Park actually already hosted an event with alcohol last year. Festival Bonjour was last year, but council had to grant a one-time exemption to make that happen. What this change does is formally add that park to the list of approved sites so that events can have alcohol for events and be part of a normal process moving forward. As for the T-Baytel Multiplex, the new indoor turf facility is expected to open this fall. And the thinking here is that certain adult events, tournaments, gatherings, community functions may also want the option to serve alcohol. Now, it's important to note a couple of things. Alcohol would not be served, obviously, during youth sporting events or regular daily activities. Thank goodness for that. The policy specifically restricts alcohol at events where participants are primarily children and youth. And any event that wants to serve alcohol still needs to obtain a special occasion permit from the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario and follow all of the city's rules around supervision, safety, etc. So really, this isn't opening the floodgates to alcohol in parks. It's simply adding a couple of venues to the list that event organizers have options when appropriate. The good news, though, passed unanimously by council. Pretty soon, you'll be able to crack open a cold one at Waverly for upcoming events and at the turf, too. But please, don't spill any red wine because it'll stain the grass. To me, I think we probably should have the turf facility open and functioning first before we start talking about events that are going to happen in it. I'm not sure why we're even going there yet. The place isn't built yet. It's still not sure if it's going to be on budget. And at the same time, how's the fundraising coming? There's a lot of empty spaces when it comes to the turf facility, but now hearing that there's going to be events on the grass that may contain alcohol makes a very interesting conversation, doesn't it? I'm not against having alcohol policies in place for the building, but at a building that's going to cost probably $50 million, are we really going to open up the field to a shag? Can you rent it for a wedding? What happens when you spill your red wine on the center field? I don't know, but it seems like there's a lot of other things we should be worrying about with the turf facility before we put it on an alcohol list.
I do want to mention, though, I think Toronto had a pilot project a couple of years ago. I don't know if it's still going to allow alcohol consumption in parks.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
well, Waverly Park,
in general, not for events, in general.
Waverly Park makes sense because they do have some great events there. Yeah. Marina Park, same thing. I'm just on the fence with the turf.
Okay.
The other major report dealt with last night was the Thunder Bay Transit and the challenges they're facing with staffing shortages. It came with a debate that lasted over an hour last night. Transit Services told council that they're still struggling to maintain full service levels because they simply don't have enough operators right now. Vacancies, sick leave, training requirements, and other absences have all been contributing to a bunch of bus cancellations. The system is supposed to deliver about 99% of scheduled trips, but last year the actual number was closer to 96% because of these staffing pressures. Now, if you've ever stood at a bus stop waiting for a bus and it never showed up, you understand exactly how frustrating this can be and problematic for appointments, work, or otherwise. So the proposal last night in front of council was to make temporary adjustments to some transit schedules starting on May the 10th, essentially reducing or shifting service on certain routes so that available operators can cover the schedule more reliably. The idea here is simple. Instead of promising a full schedule and canceling trips at the last minute, transit would run a slightly reduced schedule that actually shows up consistently. Wouldn't that be nice? Now, administration says the goal is to provide riders with a service they can depend on while the city works on recruiting and training more operators. If staffing improves over the summer and fall, service levels could gradually be restored. Now, the temporary changes would run through the summer, reducing about 6,900 hours of service between May and August while the system stabilizes. So the short version here, you may see slightly less frequent buses in some cases, but the buses are scheduled should be more reliable. Then it came to a vote. After a long debate in favor of the recommendation to change a temporary schedule from May 10th to August, what happened? It lost. Council said no to this proposal. It lost by a vote of 7-4. So, status quo with transit services, which will include cancellations and many more frustrations with riders. One of the things that was most interesting about the debate last night that I made comments of to a couple of people was that it was interesting that there was all kinds of pontification, if I can use the word, about, I ran labor and I ran businesses like this before, and I can tell you there's probably a better solution. We need to find a better solution. And then questions about the morale of the transit operators, and is that why they're calling in sick? All of these things were about transit, and none of them were about the riders. There are a lot of people in our community that depend very heavily on local transportation, and when a bus doesn't show up and they miss a doctor's appointment or are late for work, who's on the hook? It's a service that the city should be providing regardless of the pains that it'll take to make sure that every bus is running. But council last night decided to say no to the experts in administration, again losing 7-4. Everything stays the same at transit, which probably will include more cancellations.
Okay. With the whole transit story, you got me thinking about the Water Street terminal. We got an update on that. Should be open by next month.
Yeah, hopefully it's nice and cozy because there's going to be a lot of people waiting for a bus.
Yep.
Now, here's another item that may not sound that exciting at first, but it actually matters quite a bit if you're a recycler here in Thunder Bay, and you should be. Council looked at a report last night about the future of the city's recycling depots, and this one gets a little complicated because it ties to a province-wide change to how recycling is handled in Ontario. Back in 2024, the province shifted the Blue Box program to what's called full producer responsibility. What that means is that companies that produce packaging and recyclable materials are now supposed to pay for the recycling system instead of municipalities. Sounds good on paper, right? Well, under the new system, the organization responsible for running the program, called Circular Materials, told the city that starting this year, they would only operate one recycling depot in Thunder Bay, just one. The city right now has 3. So administration went back and negotiated with them, and what they managed to secure is an agreement where 900 Wall Street, the depot there, will continue operating under the provincial system, but the city itself will run the site on their behalf. Now, under the agreement, the city will receive full cost recovery for operating the site. So taxpayers aren't footing the bill for that location. But then here's the other part of the story. The other 2 depots on Front Street and at the landfill site will still operate in 2026, but those ones will be run and funded directly by the city. Together, those depots see more than 100,000 vehicle visits every year, and they collect a quarter of the city's residential recycling. So they're very heavily used. The bigger issue here is that the province originally said that the new recycling system would not reduce service for residents, but, going from 3 depots to 1, that's exactly what it is, a reduction. So administration is planning to continue advocating to the province to restore full depot coverage and potentially recover some of the costs the city is carrying in the meantime.
You're right. That's a bit confusing there.
It is.
There's a lot there.
3 to 1, but 2 of them we're still paying for.
Okay.
That recommendation passed, by the way, unanimously. Finally, last night, the animal keeping bylaw, the ball python request, as it's referred to in the agenda. First, should be important to note that Councillor Brian Hamilton declared a conflict of interest on this topic because he's got a family member with a restricted animal.
What?
I don't know. Maybe he knows somebody that has a rhinoceros. I'm not sure.
Isn't that interesting?
Yet another interesting report that came back last night that actually started quite a discussion. It all began with a deputation last year, but this was just for information. So no votes. Follow me? Mm-hmm. Back in October, someone came before the Finance and Administration Committee asking the city to allow ball pythons to be kept as pets in Thunder Bay. That must mean that somebody owns a ball python, and they're not supposed to. It's on the list right now under the city's animal keeping bylaw. That's not allowed. The bylaw prohibits all snakes in the python and boa families. along with a list of other exotic animals. In case you missed it just before 8 o'clock, there's 21 of them, including snakes from the boa and python families. Also, by the way, you can't own an elephant.
No, you cannot.
Administration was asked to come back with a report and give council their recommendation. This seems fairly clear, doesn't it? The administration says they don't support exempting ball pythons from the bylaw. There's several reasons behind it. First of all, animal welfare. Ball pythons can grow up to 6 feet long, and they live 20 to 30 years. And the city says it's difficult to ensure that private households can consistently meet the care requirements for exotic animals like that. 30 years.
Wow.
If one escapes, God forbid, it is released because the owner can't, or released because the owner can't take care of it anymore. There is no rescue or shelter capacity in Thunder Bay equipped to deal with large exotic reptiles. Second is the environmental impact. While a snake like that would not likely survive our long winters, there are still concerns that exotic species can introduce disease and disrupt local wildlife while they are alive outside. The third thing is public safety and enforcement. Ball pythons are not venomous, but they are still constrictors and can strike or bite if stressed. So we don't want them hanging around in neighborhoods.
No thanks.
Administration also pointed out that their recommendation aligns with organizations like the Ontario SPCA and the Canadian Veterinary Medical Association, which discourage keeping wild or exotic pets. So the recommendation that came to council was simple: keep the bylaw the way it is, do not create an exemption. So it was just a report. Nothing to vote on. But then Councillor Shelby Chung spoke up. Now, this was interesting, and I kind of had a chuckle or two at the beginning, but then realized what path we were going down here. Councillor Chung mentioned that she was talking to a bunch of kids, and the kids had questions. For example, corn snakes are allowed in Thunder Bay, but not pythons. Now, neither will last it will last in the cold North American winter. They're not domesticated to North America.
Ugh.
But neither are parrots, she pointed out. So why are they allowed? Now, that's a great point. But parrots are not known to be violent, or a snake. Now, Councillor Chung also pointed out something kind of funny that I got a laugh out of. She said ball pythons haven't been known to kill anyone, but a chihuahua doesn't have a 0 death rate. Well, she's got a point.
I know, but...
Chung also put forward a motion last night to add the ball python as an approved pet. So now we have a vote.
Oh.
But in order for it to get to a vote, it needs to be seconded. Who seconded it?
Who seconded it?
Councillor Zazzino did. So off it went to a discussion. The first person on the list in the discussion, Mayor Ken Boshkoff, who very clearly said to start, he was ashamed that we were even having this debate last night. It turned into a bit of a funny back and forth, but at the end of the day, it isn't all that funny, because at the end of the day, we are running a corporation with a $650 million budget, and we spent an awful lot of time last night talking about ball pythons. Although fun to start, it kind of went awry. But it went to a vote. 4 councillors approved it. Dominic Pascalino, Mike Zazzino, Albert Aiello, and Shelby Chung were all in favor of adding the ball python to the list of approved pets, but it went on to lose 7-4.
Okay. Can I also say I Googled the corn snake, and I can't.
Well, everybody, to each his own, Danny.
Yeah.
But in case you missed it just before 8 o'clock, we did run down the list of 21 different species that are not allowed as pets in the city of Thunder Bay. Yes, you can have a dog, but you can't have a wolf. Yes, you can have a cat, but you can't own a tiger. Also, you can't own bears, skunks, weasels, otters, badgers. You can have a ferret, though. The other one is the it's a hippopotamus. You can't have a hippopotamus, a giraffe, a camel, a llama, or an alpaca inside city limits. You can also not own a raccoon or a hyena. Also, it should be noted that you can't own a rhinoceros in the city of Thunder Bay or an elephant. Here's another big one. If you've ever considered, because they're really cute, you can't own a seal or a walrus.
I can't believe this.
Venomous reptiles, birds such as ostriches, can't have those either. You can't have an eagle as a pet, or a hawk, or an owl. You also can't have an alligator or a crocodile. I'm not making this up. It's in the bylaw. Also in there, in case you were wondering, no, you cannot own an armadillo in the city of Thunder Bay. That was the meeting last night. It wrapped up at 8:58.
My gosh. I'll tell you right now, I think we're living under a rock if we think that there aren't restricted animals in homes in our city.
They're absolutely
right now.
They're absolutely. I don't know what bylaw does. Do they just knock on the door and say, "Yo, you've got a python. Here's a ticket"? I don't know what the outcome of that is, but these are bylaws for a reason. And I want to make sure, all kidding aside,
I don't.
it is about the welfare of the animal too. Let's be honest. If they do escape and it's 40 below, well, why would we? But everybody has different interests and different loves of different animals. I have a dog. I love my dogs.
Yeah.
But
Back to the python. How big can they get? You said they can
the ball
live
python,
up 20 to 30 years, but how big can they
the ball python can only go to about 6 feet.
6 feet.
So that's about the height of us. It's not like a boa constrictor that can go 10.
That's
so
crazy.
But at the end of the day, it is a bylaw. And that entire list, by the way, of all 21 species is available on the city's website.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating read. No, Daddy, you can't have a pet raccoon or a weasel.
I'll tell you right now what we covered last hour.
Yeah.
I know you did cover it here.
Yeah.
But that highlight will be on yourthunderbay.ca.
Like,
in
I'd
just a
love
bit.
to have a polar bear in my backyard.
Right?
Right.
Yeah.
But you can't. Not allowed.
But that whole snake thing, could you imagine that thing slithering along Water Street here? I just.
But there
no
are
thanks.
people with garter snakes and other kinds of snakes that are
Yeah.
approved, but that was the whole point of the discussion. This one is not known to kill people. It doesn't matter. It's really more about the welfare. But it is a city bylaw that was approved by your city council, and it was upheld last night.
There it is. That's your City Council Roundup. Thanks, John. A full recap will be available at yourthunderbay.ca.